it's Jamie of Pandora Astrology here in Berkeley, California, along with.
Hey guys, it's Julia Mikos and I'm in San Francisco.
And today we're going to take a look at the question of why Trump's presidency is such a rough ride for him and the rest of us. And it has a lot to do with a particular transit that he's already been having from last year. Other transits too, but this one is really the major factor right now. And this transit has some pretty complicated factors to it. It is a transit to his Saturn. Let's begin with his natal chart here. You can see that Donald Trump has Saturn at 23 degrees of Cancer, and that's actually a pretty heated up spot in the zodiac right now. We have recently made another video about a hot degree that was created in January when Saturn and Pluto conjuncted at 22 degrees of Capricorn, which basically means that anything anywhere near or strongly aspecting 22 degrees of Capricorn is going to be feeling this this year. So you can find that video in the 2020 news playlist, and I recommend that you do. But also, Pluto is transiting Trump's Saturn, making several direct hits, and Jupiter will also be transiting Trump's Saturn, making 3 direct hits. And so I want to show you this. Here's the transit chart. We can see that Pluto is here in 24 degrees of Capricorn today, which is May 4th of 2020. Jupiter has moved ahead to 27 degrees of Capricorn, but will be passing back and forth and opposing that Saturn. And also here's 22 degrees, that hot degree in Capricorn, which is really impacting Trump's Saturn at 23 degrees. So that's the overview of these transits. Now let's get into the details. A Pluto transit to Saturn is a really tough thing for any human being to have. Now, Julia, can you give us a basic rundown of what Saturn signifies in a person's chart?
Sure. So Saturn in astrology represents the brick wall of reality. It represents all the things that are limiting you, which is why Saturn also represents work in astrology, because work is kind of a limitation on our lives. If we don't go to work, if we don't get a paycheck, life is about to get really limited. And Saturn can represent security, which is a really, really big theme that I think will be very affected by his transit from Pluto.
Yeah, I mean, is it fair to say that Saturn represents one's career, one's reputation, and responsibility as a general theme?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, and Pluto brings a metamorphosis, a transformation. And that means basically it's like a snake shedding its skin. You are forced to let go of aspects or areas of something that are really like dead and ready to be sloughed off, and then hopefully from underneath that something new can be reborn. So any human being having a Pluto transit to their Saturn would be experiencing essentially a death and rebirth of their career and their public reputation. This is very hard to navigate gracefully. And it particularly, I think, because of the feeling of lack of control that it engenders. So here you can see that Saturn being the part of his chart where this transit is impacting, this is the side of him that's going to feel the transit. His career, public reputation, his integrity, his authority are all being hammered by Pluto. So Pluto, which is the transiting planet, gives us the information on what the nature of the transit is and how it'll feel. It's a death and rebirth experience. Pluto transits bring up compulsions and addictions. Now, I venture to say that Trump is somewhat addicted to Twitter. So it's coming up, right? A Pluto transit brings us face to face with our inner demons. And Pluto transit to Saturn will bring us face to face with our inner demons regarding authority and integrity. All those demons want to come out to play. Now, a great way to express this would be to purge those demons, right? To cleanse. one's authority, to emerge as, you know, an authority with real integrity, who is more authoritative than authoritarian. But caught in the grip of a Pluto transit, it's not surprising to find a human being who actually has all the authority in the world still behaving as if he's out of control. And here's the last piece: feeling caught in the grip of forces beyond your control, so you try to assert power. So, you know, any transit can be lived in, you know, a high road way or a low road way. And I leave it up to you as to which Trump is doing right now. So also during this, there's a Jupiter transit going on. And so with the result that you might say that for Trump this year is the best of times and the worst of times. The worst of times because of the Pluto transit, which is really grueling. But also the best of times because if the Pluto transit wasn't happening and if the hot degree wasn't also hitting on Pluto's Saturn, he probably would be having a banner year because Jupiter would be transiting his Saturn. And that tends to bring wonderful things. A Jupiter transit brings growth and expansion. It often brings a feeling of confidence, a feeling of certainty in one's competency. Handled the right way, a Jupiter transit can bring opportunities and luck, usually because you're radiating so much positivity and optimism and enthusiasm that other people want to follow your leadership. So he has an opportunity this year to really grow as a leader. This transit can bring an increase in the reach of your influence, therefore. Now, another side effect of Jupiter transits is that because Jupiter is all about expansion and growth, right? It can blow things up big so that you can actually see them. So if the planet that Jupiter is transiting is not being lived in a high road way by the person who has it, but a low road way, that will be blown up big where everyone can see it in the public eye. It will be made obvious. So handled the wrong way, this transit shows your flaws on the largest stage possible. And that means good things will look better and bad things will look worse. So Julia, what are your thoughts about this Jupiter transit? Because you were talking about the fluctuations in Trump's approval rating.
You know, I think that the combination of Pluto and Jupiter transiting his Saturn by opposition are going to bring up some mixed conditions this year, especially for him business-wise. I mean, I just keep
what a good
thinking,
point.
I mean, he's first and foremost a businessman, right?
Right.
So that Jupiter opposition means that there may be some careful expansion and growth in some of his ventures, in some of his business ventures. But I think ultimately the outer planet transit is going to, no pun intended, trump it. And I think that this opposition of Pluto to his Saturn is really going to affect his financial backing and his financial resources. Ultimately, there will be some expansion there, but you know, reality is full of mixed conditions. Ultimately, I think that Pluto opposition, his bank account's going to look a little bit different after these transits.
I want to throw in one more thing, which is that Trump's natal Saturn is in the sign of Cancer, which is the sun sign of the United States of America. And there's a dynamic in the chart of America that pits a faction, you might say, that is very much about homeland and about national pride, and I would say nationalism itself, and backed by a sense of family and shared genes. And there is another side of the USA chart that is very much about internationalism, about multiculturalism, and how this country is a melting pot. And those two pieces of the national chart are in very strong and very painful conflict with each other. That's a subject for another video, which you can look for on our YouTube channel, Pandora Astrology, because you'll find it there soon if it's not there already. And the USA is about to have its Pluto return. And so a lot of these themes that we're talking about right now in Trump's chart are part of the lead up to our whole country going through a massive transformation where we have got to slough off and shed, particularly some of the corruption and authoritarianism that is going on. Trump's Saturn in Cancer tells us what the great work of his lifetime is. Everybody has Saturn in their chart, and Saturn is what tells you what is the great work of your lifetime, the thing that you've come here to do that is the hardest work and really induces fear and feels just feels so arduous to do. But when you do it and do it well, then you come away from this life feeling like you've accomplished what you came here to do. And for Trump, with his Saturn in Cancer, that great work is the work of family. It's the work of emotional vulnerability. It's the work of having family members and bonding with them, being close with them, being emotionally real with them, and figuring out how to manage your emotions. You know, how to have them without tantruming them. And, you know, this is what the great work is. And so this is some of what is being challenged. And that's a pretty big theme in the United States chart as well, with its themes of family and its themes attendant upon that of patriotism and nationalism. So I think this is some of where Trump really connects with some of his most fervent base. And all of that is having a hell of a year with these transits. Goodness, did I say everything I needed to say? I'm just checking my notes right now. I think one thing that you pointed out, Julia, when we were prepping to make this video is that Jupiter's transit, you know, is there and is possibly making this whole thing nicer than it could have been. But there's a rule in astrology, which is the heavier planet always wins. Could you explain that, Julia?
Sure. So outer planets. Outer planets are planets which are beyond the Kuiper belt. You know, traditionally it was only Jupiter and Saturn, but now with modern astrology we have Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And so those transits from the outer planets tend to be a lot longer than inner planet transits. So a transit from Venus lasts for about a day. A transit from the moon lasts for a matter of hours because the orbs which are close to the Earth are going to be moving a lot more quickly. Now, when you get an outer planet transit from something like Neptune or Pluto, which is just so far in our solar system, they take a lot longer, and therefore they tend to be a lot more developmental. They tend to be a lot more intense. They tend to correspond with greater events in your life. So again, in that sort of succession of planets, you have Jupiter, which is kind of far out there, but it's in the middle. And then you have Pluto, which is really, really far out there. So its transit is definitely going to be a bit of the heavyweight.
Yes, so Pluto's transit lasts for about 1 3/4 years. Jupiter's transit only lasts for about 8 months. And Pluto being, as we would call it in astrology, the heavier planet, is probably going to win. All right, I think that's it. Hope you enjoyed this and got a lot out of it. You'll find this video on our YouTube channel, Pandora Astrology. Also on our site, Pandora Astrology, where you can find horoscopes too and our monthly forecast. And we'll see you around the cosmos. Bye.
Bye-bye.